I got another mobility video for you today. Today is about mobilizing for the conventional deadlift and thinking and viewing this thing from kind of a really overall perspective. You want to be able to kind of take a look at all the pieces. When you try to teach someone the deadlift or you deadlift yourself, you want to make sure that everything is moving like the way it should. And one of those things that needs to move the way it should is hips. Hip flexion and hip extension. We know many of us who have trouble getting to the bottom of a squat have trouble with their inner thighs or our hamstrings. A lot of issues with the knees coming in, lots of issues with the back rounding, lots of different flexibility issues. But more specifically, to go in kind of the bit deeper detail into the conventional deadlift, one of the biggest problems that people have when they go down to adjust the bar and set themselves up for the bar is typically lower back rounding. Now, what causes lower back rounding? There's lots of things. People will say your hamstrings are tight. People will say you don't have the coordination for it. Other people may say that you just have tight hamstrings. It's usually what most people say. But most of the time what ends up happening is that you just don't have full range of motion in the right muscle groups and the right joints, and that's what they say hamstrings. And although that does make a lot of sense, stretch my hamstrings and I'll be able to get down to the bottom, that's true. However, the one thing that you want to really consider is being able to get into good full hip flexion. Now you can see here from this position, I actually don't have really good hip flexion because if I stand up straight and I bring my knee up, I can barely get past full range of motion. I can barely get to past 90 degrees. The only reason why it might look higher is because I'm trying to extend here on this back leg. It's a compensation pattern. So kind of one of the things that have helped me a lot is doing the hamstring floss with the band distraction. There's pretty much no other stretch that I've been able to find that can replicate this kind of movement improvement. So why is hip flexion important? Well, flexing at the hip, or in the case of getting ready for a deadlift, let me get this barbell here. Alright, in the case of a conventional deadlift, a lot of the time is being able to get to the bar, reach down for the barbell, and then maintain a curve in your lower back. People's lower back will have a tendency to round, or their pelvis will begin to dump, which is basically doing a posterior tilt, which is the back rounding. So kind of what ends up happening for a lot of people as they reach down for the bar, they try to reach for the bar, they have to kind of make a fault movement here in the lower back. And what they end up doing is they have to reposition themselves so they can get a tightness in the hamstring. So kind of what I like to kind of go over is kind of how to improve that position and how you can improve this hip flexion position. If there's any one thing that I have trouble with in my own deadlift and trying to get better with deadlifting and getting the optimal leverages so that I can use the most amount of hamstring and glute musculature as possible, is being able to create a better crease here at the hip. So I come down, knees go forward a little bit, down, 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 down. And then I have to reach for the bar. Now I have some trouble, I have to round my upper back a little bit, which is not always a bad thing if you're trying to go for a max lift. But for the purposes of teaching normal, everyday people trying to be strong, think about this for a second. Coming down, I hit my hip range of motion, and for me to get down for the bar, I have to round my lower back just a little bit to get there. But probably a better option would be to bend my knees more, have my knees go forward. But I want to be able to still get into this position, which is not very easy if I'm having a lot of pinching. Now, with a lot of people that I work with, when I hear them say my hip is pinching, or I feel a pinch in my hip flexor, or I'm having hip flexor pain, or something gets stuck, or something just feels weird here. Basically, they don't say it's weird, they feel something that's odd. The one thing that I always tell them or go over is the hamstring floss. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's something that definitely is very helpful if you run into this issue, either for yourself or for someone you're working with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the band, I'm going to step inside the band like so, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the band right here in the front of the hip. So this is my package right here, and then I got my thigh bone, and it's pulling forward. So one way to also, this is kind of another way that I like to mobilize too. Sometimes I'll go into this position here, which helps distract the upper leg thigh, and it pushes the thigh bone back a little bit and deeper into the socket, and I'll kind of go into this movement here to help improve the mechanics of that ball and socket joint. Just like this is one way of doing it. Another way that I always use almost all the time, again my K-Star, this favorite hamstring floss. So I bend the knee, trying to maintain neutral curve in my back. I get to stretch in the hamstring a bit, and then I reach forward for the ground. And then as I extend the leg, I go back and forth while this band is pulling my femur bone back. And all I'm doing is I'm trying to improve the space in between my torso and my upper thigh. This stretches a lot of different muscles, but what you're really doing is you're trying to mobilize a position of where you are restricted or where you're having trouble making movement. And what I'm doing is, I'm just trying to stretch the hamstring, but more importantly, try to get the joints in the right position. Now, the one thing to consider when doing the stretch is that you're trying to create the same shape of what you're trying to do, which is the conventional deadlift. Feet are straight, reaching down for the barbell, and then pulling through. And all I'm doing is I'm trying to improve this hip movement right here. That way, when I come down, I come forward. The interesting thing about these stretches is that every time I watch, Kelly Starret videos and I watch these stretches, it's kind of hard to really understand how this stuff works if you've never done them before and you don't know what to feel. And I'll give you some kind of simple tips that have helped me, is that for the hamstring floss, or I should say a majority of the stretches, you don't want to super lots of tension, at least not right away. You want to be able to let them, because if you put too much tension right away, what I've found is that the joints have difficulty, or the muscle have trouble relaxing, and the joints will have trouble moving in the position that you want them to be in. It's nice to start with just a little bit of moderate, probably light to moderate tension, and then try to get that thing to kind of sit back. And as you kind of floss back and forth to improve that hip flexibility, by improving this space here, hip flexion, stretching out the hamstring, stepping the leg forward, continuing to go back and forth. What this does, it allows for me to basically reach down for my toes with less of a lower back rounding position. Now let's take a look at the bar here, going back to the barbell, and let's go see if I can get down to the bar without too much back rounding. So right here I can grab the bar now, so I've created more space. It does lots of different things. It helps improve that spot where I can improve this hip coming back while being able to keep this neutral spine, because a lot of times people run out of space in the front of the hip. Let's go see. A lot of people run out of space in front of the hip, so what ends up happening, they get stuck, so they have no choice in order to reach for the bar to roll forward, or they have to move their legs, bend their knees forward, which is not a bad thing, but one of the biggest advantages is that if you're able to improve this hip flexion position, you're able to reach down for the bar in the optimal tension position, grab the bar, and do basically a perfect deadlift. Because you're just trying to create the right motor patterns and allow your body to move in path of least resistance. Because when you have tight musculature, your body will default to trying to move into its path of least resistance. And this path of least resistance may not necessarily be the optimal position for your body to get the most amount of muscle recruitment, big muscle recruitment, the correct muscle recruitment, so that you can get the most force production out of a movement. And of course, most importantly, optimal recruitment, so that you can build, whether it be trying to have a bigger deadlift for powerlifting, whether it be to build high muscle hypertrophy in your glutes, hamstrings, and just build general overall muscle.